As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
Hello everyone and welcome to Nation Watch. Today, Sunday, 10th December 2023. We are heading closer to Christmas and we're heading closer to regional and national elections. We also seem to be heading to some crisis situations. So we meet today at a very, very difficult time in the history of our country. Recently, there was a tragedy that struck our country. Our military helicopter went down, one of them, and we lost 5 patriots, 5 dedicated Guyanese patriots. And today we remember them. Retired Brigadier Gary Beaton, Colonel Michael Shahood, Lieutenant Colonel retired Mike Charles, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Welcome, and Sergeant Jason Khan, 5 patriots who perished in a really, really terrible tragedy. We salute them for their service, and we thank their families for allowing them to give national service in defense of their country. With me this morning is Rear Admiral retired Dr. Gary Best, former Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force. Dr. Best, I welcome you to Nation Watch under very difficult circumstances. You have worked with these men, you have trained with these men, you have led these men. How difficult is this for you, and how difficult it is for the Guyana Defense Force, which is a family out there?
Thank you, Marvin, and thanks for listeners. It's a really sad and tragic moment for me when I got the news. I kept hoping that there'll be a rescue of all the men that were on that helicopter. It's sad for the nation. It's a tragic loss. Let me say that laying your life down for your country is the highest level of service. When we join the Guyana Defense Force, we join knowing fully well that there may come a time, or it may come a time, that we have to lay our lives down for our country. Those of us who come out of the service after many years without having to actually do that, we feel a sense of relief. But theirs is the greater duty, that is dying in service to this nation. Theirs is the greatest duty. I knew them very well, except Sergeant Khan. I knew him so well. Colonel Beaton, Brigadier Beaton, as an engineer par excellence. I knew him from the time he came into the GDF. I saw him grow up in the GDF. And there are 2 distinguishing things I'd like to mention about him. The ground at Camp Ayangano, our headquarters, flooded every time there was a rainy season. For decades, for years. And we couldn't figure it out. And when I became the staff, I called in Gary to solve this problem. He said, sorry, it's an engineering problem. Being an engineer, proceeded to do whatever he had to do, calculations, analysis. And he came with a plan. And since then, that ground has never flooded again. That is a testimony to his engineering ingenuity and capability. And we commended him for that. Additionally, when I was looking for someone to head the Coast Guard, someone who could bring a different sense of command and ability for the Coast Guard, outside of the Coast itself, based on the fact that at the time the officers were very junior in the Coast Guard, I turned to Gary Beaton and asked him if he would take that command. I asked him if he will take the command. And he unhesitantly said, yes, sir. and he went to Coast Guard. He took off his camouflage and then ended up wearing blues and whites. And he commanded the Coast Guard. And he brought a sense of discipline into the unit at the time, but more so his technical ability in determining the technical specifications for the Coast Guard equipment and also the Coast Guard operations. So that's how distinguished his service was to me. And I think the nation benefited from his service. And I know he went on into the government sector to work. So yes, I want to, again, just go on record where Gary Beaton is concerned. Brigadier Beaton, engineer par excellence, officer par excellence, in my experience with him. I must say also that very early in his career, I had the platoon commander's battle book, and I didn't know what to do with it after a while. And as a young officer, I gave it to him. I said, this will be very useful to you. And he kept it for decades. And one day he said, look, I still have this book you gave to me. So it was very sad to come to the realization that he would not be rescued. Colonel Shuhud, I know very well too. Colonel Shuhud. He's one of those we call gung-ho officers. Very active, very professional. He conducted several special operations when I was chief of staff that I can't go into detail, but again, he acquitted himself well. He always saw the task and always acted mission, or he was always mission oriented, so to speak. For him, the mission was the most important thing. And he kept to that mission, stuck to that mission. So he's not the officer who will give up on a mission. He's the officer who will continue and try every single thing in the book to complete that mission. So again, I know him very well, and it's extended family too. And in that regard, it's been painful and hurtful to me also. But again, distinguishingly speaking, an officer par excellence. He did his work to the highest standard. And I wasn't surprised that he rose up into the Ghanaian Defense Force the way he rose. And we couldn't have asked a better command at the time to be in charge of the infantry battalion. So it's a great loss to the Ghanaian Defense Force. Tragic loss. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Charles, pilot par excellence. Mike is the kind of officer, if we were to, and I'm sure this will come out in the sentiments, no one will be able to say at any point in time in Mike's career or Mike's life or heard any negative comment from Mike or any bad word from Mike. Everyone loved Mike. Mike spoke calmly and at times authoritatively when it came to the issue of aviation. So this is an aviation export. This is an aviation icon. This is a pilot par excellence that we have lost. But let me just say that when we were looking to increase our fleet during my tenure as chief of staff, we were able to get some funding from the government, and that had to do with the purchase of helicopters at the time. And we sat and discussed this issue, and instead of purchasing one helicopter, Mike and I agreed we should purchase two. With his insistence and his expertise, because you need two at least to have one in the air all the time. Those are the Bell 206 helicopters, the smaller ones. And there was a lot of discussion within the Air Corps fraternity. It's a very specialized fraternity. We call them, they're called sometimes the Blue Eye Boys in the GDF because of their special skill and the risk they take in flying. And Mike pushed that issue, and I had to commend him for being brave against a lot of, pushback. And at the same time, he was prepared to ferry the helicopters to Guyana. And those are smaller helicopters, to ferry them to Guyana, to fly them to Guyana. And that was done at the highest professional level. But outside of that, he's also a charmer. When I say a charmer, I mean it in a positive sense. Mike will come, he'll talk to you, and he has a way of charming the chiefs of staff out of maybe a decision that he's not comfortable with, but he knows how to do it professionally. And again, that's a great loss. His years of experience as a pilot in the Ghanaian Defense Force, those are not replaceable, because your quiet experience over years, over decades. So again, that's a tragic loss for us. Colonel Welcome, Sean Welcome, that has a special significance to me. and one that is perhaps a bit more painful than the others, in the sense that Sean was a Special Forces commander that was on site. He was the on-scene commander when we had an aircraft accident with Captain Nandan, the late Captain Nandan. That was an island aircraft. So he was the on-scene commander for that operation. And he's the person who went up the mountain to locate the aircraft. Unfortunately, at the time, during that incident, the pilot and men, had perished. And when this incident occurred, I kept praying that he can be rescued, having been part of a rescue before. He had a shorter stint in the regular GDF, but he was so passionate to return to the reserve and ended up being commanding the reserve. So it's an officer full of life. But I really kept praying that, Sean would come out and the others from this, knowing fully well that he was on the ground when they had a similar incident. He was a lieutenant at the time. And he went up that mountain, and what he saw, was very impactful. I went up the mountain subsequently, saw them in. So I was just hoping and praying, that, he would come through like the others, but it wasn't to be. I also taught him at University of Guyana on a master's program. He came back as a student. So the connection is very close. And again, I know part of his extended family. So again, but an officer par excellence who did gave committed service to the Guyana Defense Force. And Staff Sergeant Khan, again, I didn't know him very well. I know a little bit about him, but I know his service has been of a highest standard. And he was also involved in different types of special operations. Those operations we don't really speak in public about. But, it's a great loss to the GDF, to the nation. And I just want to emphasize that giving your life for your country or entering an organization where you may be called upon to give your life to your country is the highest service one can give to one's country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gary Best, former Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force. Guyana has lost, the Guyana Defense Force in particular has lost, and we are at a point in time in Guyana's history where every citizen is needed, every soldier, every officer is needed. So the Chief of Staff, officers, and other ranks of the Guyana Defense Force from the People's National Congress Reform, please accept our sincere condolences. And to the relatives, friends, and surviving associates of the deceased servicemen, especially Sister Maggie Pierre, mother of Colonel Shahood, please accept our sincere condolences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too. Thank you.
We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will speak with Ambassador Ronald Austin on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. Thank you again for coming on this.
Of Guyana, of rivers and plains, made rich by the sunshine and lush by the rains, say a gem light and fair between mountains and seas. Your children salute you, dear land of the free land of Guyana, our heroes of yore. Oh, and to you will we give our homage, our service each day that we live. God, guard you, great mother, and make us to be more worthy our heritage. Land of the free.
Welcome back to Nation Watch. It's Sunday, 20th December 2023. And that's the last time that we in the rest of the rest of the series. As we look past the end of the also. Welcome to the rest of the and very much spend this on the rest of this and on this business. That's we're asking our colleagues in terms of what ABTV can arrange to accommodate us, if that's what they can. We think that they're eligible for them to be community events, community developments in this particular matter that we need to discuss. Ambassador Austin, you are part of Team Guyana. That very important group of men and women assembled by our country to represent our national interest at the level of the International Court of Justice. What is the mood? How is that team gelling? What's the mood of the team? Particularly with regard to the recent provisional measures outlined or ordered by the ICJ on December 1st with respect to Guyana's approach to that body, seeking these provisional measures as the Maduro-led Venezuelan government got into full gear for a December 3rd referendum. What's the mood and how's the team doing?
Well, I must say that I'm part of a national delegation which initially consisted of the Attorney General, Nandalal, and Mr. Shearer, and Mr. Greenidge, of course, who's the agent for the case before the ICJ. And that group of people, along with the lawyers in The Hague, that is Paul Reichler, Professor Pillay, Professor Darjon. We've all worked very well together, and I don't know of any untoward development among any members of that delegation. We all sit around the same table to discuss, ventilate ideas, listen to the lawyers, and then we're all asked to make an input into whatever final decision they may make. I think the group has worked well. And I think it's the input from that group, along with the lawyers, that led to the, first of all, presenting the case to the ICJ, and then on December 1st, the issuance of the provisional measures based on our request to the ICJ. So if I should say in summary, the group has worked well, and also that the group had something to do with the final decision coming out of the court.
Guyana is indebted to this team of persons in much the same way as it is indebted to our military personnel who lost their lives. All are involved.
Yeah.
In the ruling on December 1st, Venezuela was called upon to refrain from taking any action which would modify the situation that currently prevails in the territorial dispute. This is a quote from the actual report. But there is a subject of a separate opinion issued by Judge Robinson.
Yeah.
I want to read this so that our audience can get a background to where we're going with this.
Mhm.
And I'm quoting from the International Court of Justice record. Separate opinion of Judge Robinson. And it says, mischaracterization of Guyana's extant sovereignty over the disputed territory as control and administration. Serious risk of Venezuela acquiring the territory in dispute in the present case in order to exercise sovereignty. Judge Robinson says, while I agree with the grant of the provisional measures to Guyana, I disagree with the court's reasoning in certain parts of the order, as well as the formulation of the first provisional measure set up in operative paragraph 45 of the order. Point 2, he says, it is surprising that paragraph 41 of the order reads, and he quotes, the court observes that the situation that currently prevails in the territory in dispute is that Guyana administers and exercises control over that area. That's the end of his quote. 3, he says, it is surprising because the situation in Guyana today is the same situation that has prevailed since 1899, when, as stated in paragraph 23 of the order, the territory which forms the object of the dispute was awarded to British Guyana in the 1899 award. Thus, from that time to 1966, British Guyana exercised sovereignty over the disputed territory, and from 1966 to present time, independent Guyana has exercised sovereignty over the disputed territory. The dispute between Guyana and Venezuela does not alter the factual situation that since 1966, Guyana has exercised sovereignty over the disputed territory. Consequently, he says, instead of observing that today Guyana administers and exercises control over the disputed territory, the court ought to have observed that today Guyana administers and exercises sovereignty over the disputed territory. What say you, Ambassador Austin, with respect to this minority opinion with which I wholeheartedly agree, by the way?
It's not a minority opinion, it's a separate opinion. You will see the title.
Yeah, let's see that. Let's see that. Yes, I beg your pardon. It says separate opinion. Separate opinion.
Could I, just before I proceed to answer your question, just back up a bit to say that the delegation, the last delegation to the Hague, did not include Mr. Shearer and Mr. Nandula, A.T. Nandula, but Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Health, just for the record. Now, if you look at the decision handed down on the first, if you're a non-lawyer like me, there's certain words that tend to leap out at you. For example, in the first part of that decision, it says that Venezuela should do nothing to modify the control that Guyana exercises and administer over the disputed territory.
Disputed territory.
Well, all my life in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I mean, we were told it was part of the mantra as a young officer that there's no dispute over the question of the territory, which consists of the Essequibo. That dispute was settled in 1899, and the boundaries were demarcated subsequent to the arbitral award. And the controversy only arose as paragraph 1 of the Geneva Agreement. Controversy has arisen as a result of Venezuela's contention that the 1899 award is null and void. So the 15 judges of the court, all learned and brilliant people, unanimously handed down this decision. And reading it as a layman, I found it a bit odd. And I thought my oddity had something to do with my non-legal background until I read Ralph Ramkaran this morning, and he has a very clear explanation. And in his view, the judges might have erred or misunderstood or mischaracterized exactly what the situation is. That is not disputed territory. There's a dispute over the validity of the 1899 award. And that is what both Judge Robinson, Jamaica, was quite familiar with the border controversy. He was at the United Nations with us in the 1970s. And Judge Subutende, who's a Ugandan, brilliant woman, who essentially said the same thing, that given the fact that in the historical background to the decision, the court says that the 1899 award is historically a valid decision. And then subsequently, towards the end of that of the decision, it talks about the disputed territory. The question is, what does one do in those circumstances? I did have the opportunity to ask the lawyers in The Hague. In these circumstances, given that there appears to be an interpretation which is in conflict with what I have known to be the actual situation, and there's a lot of splitting of hairs as to sovereignty and administration and control. But I think Judge Roberts is right. If we've been in possession of this territory since 1899,
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it also is included in our description in the Constitution of the Republic.
the Republic, yes, that's a very good point. Why say that it is a disputed territory? And I suppose only the judges in The Hague can explain what has happened. The thing is, I discreetly inquired whether one can ask these questions, or in Guyana you can ask for clarification. I understand in the courts here for a judgment or a decision which has been made. I don't think you can do the same thing with the ICJ. But it is a decision whose ambiguity could be exploited by the Venezuelans, and in fact, they have said that the decision of the court was very much in their favor.
Yeah. I want to move on. I know we could spend a lot more time here,
Yeah.
but I want to move on to some other developments. Nation Watch 2 Sundays ago called for an urgent meeting of CARICOM heads,
Yes.
to discuss the issue of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. Someone seemed to have heard, and there was such a meeting 2 days ago.
Mhm.
The statement coming out from CARICOM, in my view, is just as unsettling as the decision coming out of The Hague, as you have outlined. No need to go back to that. CARICOM says, and I quote one little piece of this statement, little excerpt. CARICOM reiterates its commitment to the Caribbean as a zone of peace and the maintenance of international law. Accordingly, CARICOM calls for a de-escalation of the conflict and for appropriate dialogue between the leaders of Venezuela and Guyana to ensure peaceful coexistence, the application and respect for international law, and the avoidance of the use of threats of force. CARICOM seems in this statement to be equating the Cooperative Republic of Guyana to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in terms of its position on this issue. Venezuela is aggressive. The president of Venezuela has issued decrees. He has issued ultimatum for investors in Guyana's sovereign territory to remove themselves within 3 months. He has said that he is going to register and issue identification cards and so on to Guyanese resident in Essequibo. This is aggression. The referendum itself was a form of aggression against Guyana. Guyana has done none of these things or anything close to it. Guyana simply called for a peaceful resolution and has committed openly, both government and opposition, to abide by the final determination of the International Court of Justice whenever it comes.
Yeah.
Why would CARICOM categorize a founding nation of this regional body almost as an aggressive nation where the Guyana Venezuela?
I have seen better crafted statements at CARICOM, where I once worked many years ago. And what is troubling is that the CARICOM seems to be reflecting a sentiment or a view, which has been expressed by the Venezuelans. I don't know if you are privileged to hear Ms. Delcy Rodriguez's address to the ICJ,
Yes.
in which she characterized Guyana as an aggressive nation. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Moderator, and I think we ought to stop looking at this entire question in parochial terms. I tell you what I mean. You are talking about a small nation operating within a regional and an international system. A small nation whose geostrategic appeal is less than the country with which it's in contention, that is Venezuela. And whether you look at the CARICOM statement, the recent, even the statement, the second part of the statement of the ICJ, it talks about neither country doing anything to aggravate the situation. Yeah. Here again, Guyana has done nothing in 60 years. Not one single act of this country has been done that you can say is aggressive towards Venezuela or any other nation in this region. And it is, I think it's a very important matter, and our government, and certainly our diplomats, should really get busy trying to get rid of this notion that Guyana somehow could be equated with Venezuela as an aggressive state. You know why these things are dangerous? I went to a school in England many years ago, many moons ago, and they have a group, and they meet on the internet every so often. And when they read that statement, for example, the one from CARICOM and the one from the ICJ, the obvious question that they could ask me is, how big is Guyana's army? And when I said to them, look, it's a tiny GDF, it's a very small army compared to what Venezuela has, they were shocked. The point I'm making to you is that if you do not deal with a message like that quickly and condimely, you run the risk of creating the wrong impression out there. And I'm a bit surprised. I don't know who attended that CARICOM meeting or summit, and I'm sure Guyana must have been represented there. That statement should have been crafted in a very different way, as to show that when it comes to aggression, we're nowhere near what Venezuela does.
But it is disturbing for many reasons, because it says to me, a citizen of this country, that the efforts of Forbes Burnham and succeeding heads of state, heads of government of this country have really been discarded by Sister CARICOM heads.
Mm.
Guyana is a founding member of first CARIFTA, then CARICOM.
Mm.
And here it is, this statement comes out and it sounds as though CARICOM has turned its back on Guyana. Obviously, there are leaders in CARICOM, heads of government in CARICOM who are benefiting from the petrodiplomacy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Is this coming? Is this the reason?
Well, it could be. It could be one reason, but let us go back to the point you made, the element of disappointment in what this current group of leaders of CARICOM, disappointment in them, because quite a few of them are quite familiar with Guyana. They know Guyana does not have a big army. They know that Guyana has not been aggressive with Venezuela or Suriname or any other state in the region. And yet these statements keep coming out either of CARICOM itself or out of the mouths of leaders in this region. I think you may recall what it is the Barbados Prime Minister said only quite recently. Exactly the same formulation that you read from that meeting. Now, the question is, why are they doing this?
Well, look, here's the question. It is universal knowledge that the military strength of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is at least half the national population of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Ralph Gonzalez knows that. Mia Matley knows that. Keith Rowley knows that. All CARICOM heads know this. How, therefore, in good conscience, could such heads of government sit around the table and agree to a statement that equates Guyana with Venezuela as an aggressive nation?
We have to bear a lot of the responsibility. CARICOM, the community of nations within CARICOM, that the leadership of those nations has undergone fundamental change. The leaders like Barrow, Manley, Byrd will never, in my judgment, have agreed to the kind of statement coming out of the community that would even remotely suggest that Guyana is an aggressive nation. At the same time, one has to concede that in the 70s and the 80s, there was no Petro-Carib or ALBA community of states. Venezuela, despite the warnings issued by Eric Williams in 1976, by Mr. Burnham at Chirias in 1981, has been able to penetrate the English-speaking Caribbean community very effectively, either through economic assistance, culturally, or through personal relationships. For example, as the one that our friend Ralph Gonzalez has with Maduro. He saw the letter that he wrote setting up this meeting that President Ali will attend.
Which will come to in greater detail.
It is addressed to Irfan and Nicholas, and signed by Ralph. No, that tells you something.
We know that Mr. Burnham's diplomacy was far superior to the recently attempted and failed catfish diplomacy, but that's a whole different issue. Ambassador Austin, the leader of the opposition has committed, the parliamentary opposition is committed to the government and people of Guyana that we stand united with the government on the issue of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. There was at least one meeting, I don't know of any other, but I know of one meeting where the president, Mr. Ali, and the leader of the opposition, Mr. Norton, met with their respective teams and had conversation. I think you were part of the opposition's team in that meeting. there was a motion that was put before the National Assembly, which both government and opposition contributed to. That motion was debated, it was passed unanimously. In that motion, this issue of unity was foremost. I believe we might have a clip of the actual motion, the resolution.
Yes.
That speaks to the question of unity. You have it there on the screen. It speaks to continued engagement of opposition and government as we go forward. The leader of the opposition has not since been engaged. The president has gone about his business as usual. And now there's a new development. And we'll play a short video of Mr. Ralph Gonzalez telling the world that he is conducting negotiations which started since September to bring the presidents of Guyana and Venezuela together for dialogue. The nation of Guyana has no knowledge of this, or had no knowledge of this before this revelation in Mr. Ralph Gonzalez's press conference. And
have impelled me to have this briefing.
So through you, to inform the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Caribbean, and the world regarding an important initiative for face-to-face dialogue between the presidents of Guyana and Venezuela. That meeting, that dialogue, face-to-face, is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 14th, here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This discussion would relate to matters consequential upon the border controversy which exists between Guyana and Venezuela. I did not intend to address this matter until early in the week, but there has been a report on it out of Venezuela and also out of Guyana, and I understand that the letter which I wrote earlier today and sent to President Ofanali of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and President.
right, so here is a CARICOM head of government negotiating a meeting between the presidents of Guyana and Venezuela, while CARICOM as a collective is saying that Guyana and Venezuela must do everything to make sure that this remains a zone of peace, casting Guyana as a potential threat to somebody else. And this comes at a time when the people of Guyana expect a united approach from government and opposition on this matter. And I'm saying to our listening and viewing public that the leader of the opposition of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Mr. Aubrey Compton Norton MP, has no knowledge of these negotiations, is completely unaware, well, was completely unaware until this press conference came up. And so, is this bad faith on the part of the government, or is it a case where it was necessary to keep this information away from the leader of the opposition?
Let me see if I can answer your very, very important question this way. You remember, it can't be several months ago, when I think Mr. Maduro wanted to reestablish Petrocaribe.
Yes.
Who was the person he
Ralph
turned to?
Gonzalez.
Ralph Gonzalez. Now, the other day when there was a press conference with May Motley and Ralph Gonzalez, and he was asked this question about the border controversy. Again, it was under the general rubric of a zone of peace. But everybody knew while he was making those statements that a lot of heads, CARICOM heads, and this goes back to what we just talked about, the extent to which Venezuela has managed to penetrate the Caribbean to the point where they're reaching into the cabinets of these governments and getting prime ministers to do things which, in ordinary circumstances, they would not do because it might appear to be injurious to an important member state of CARICOM, to Guyana. So I found this tape when I first listened to it a bit shocking, because these negotiations have been going on since September, and there are big players involved in these negotiations. I mean, the British, the Americans, the Brazilians, heavyweights,
And I believe the UN
and the
Secretary General's name has been mentioned.
The Secretary General, and this, our good friend Ralph said that he was briefing our president. What concerns me as a citizen, as a member of the People's National Congress, is what understandings or engagements were concluded in that period prior to the announcement of this meeting on the 14th of December. You asked a very good question. Has the leader of the opposition been told everything about those exchanges?
He's been told nothing. I confirm that.
Well, the trouble is, he's not being asked, and I understand from
President contacts the leader of the opposition today, if he contacted him before this program started, or if he gets into contact with him now, and says to him, look, I'm going to this meeting, there is still a breach of trust there. There's still a breach of good faith and agreement there, because if we pledge commitment to a united front with the government on this matter, should not the leader of the opposition, at minimum, have been involved in these conversations? Mr. Gonzalez has made it clear. We don't have the time to play Mr. Gonzalez right now. He has made it clear. He said, I've had many conversations with my friend Irfan Ali, both over the phone and face to face. So there have been multiple engagements.
Yes. But there's no dispute over that anymore.
Yeah, and the leader of the opposition has not been briefed. This is not a Freedom House issue. This is not even an Office of the President in isolation issue. This is a national issue.
Both the resolution in the National Assembly and the joint statement issued at the end of the meeting between the leader of the opposition and the president, there was a commitment to remain engaged.
Yes.
And when you say remain engaged, it means I will bring you along each step along the way as this situation evolves. You cannot come to me at the end of a period where you've spent about 3 months discussing a meeting and then you don't consult me, and then you're going off the meeting to with the supposed mandate. We're entering, if something is not done and done very quickly, we're going to be entering a very dangerous period as between the opposition itself and the government in this country. Something that we should avoid at all costs at this particular moment in time.
Which leads to the more important question here, Ambassador Austin. What exactly is President Irfan Ali going to discuss with President Maduro? It is clear that this matter of the territorial controversy is before the International Court of Justice. Engagements, therefore, ought not to touch this particular issue. The president needs to assure this nation that he is not going to discuss this issue. The leader of the opposition, in a statement, I think a day or two ago, made it clear that this territorial controversy is not up for discussion and negotiations bilaterally.
Yeah.
So what exactly has Ralph negotiated as an agenda? Will the president of this country tell the nation what is the agenda for this meeting? And from whom did he get this mandate?
I'm sure you're familiar with the letter that which is now in the public domain, written by Ralph Gonzalez to Irfan and Nicholas. That letter says clearly, and he said it in the video just now.
Yeah.
He said it's consequent upon developments in the border controversy.
Yeah.
That is what the two sides are supposed to be engaged to talk about. At the same time, the president has said he's not discussing the land boundary at this meeting. The opposition has made it clear that the question of the border controversy must be outside of the ambit of this particular meeting, which is coming up.
Or any other one for that matter.
The question is, how do we, as a political party or as a nation, square our position of not doing anything to undermine our position at the ICJ with the fact that Mr. Maduro will enter St. Vincent not wanting to talk about anything else but the border controversy. Maduro is not going to turn up, President Maduro, not going to turn up there to talk about exports to Guyana or the refugees. He has one obsession.
Which leads me to another point. And I'll ask the operator to cue up the next video, which we're going to bring to the attention of our viewers. Is Ralph Gonzalez, to borrow from another Caribbean leader, a utensil of President Maduro? I want to bring to the attention of the Guyanese population an excerpt from Mr. Ralph Gonzalez's address to the United Nations General Assembly. And I want to ask that we listen very keenly to what Mr. Gonzalez is saying here and determine for ourselves what are the intentions behind this address and for whom does Mr. Gonzalez sing. Let's go to the video, please.
A different type of metaphorical storm is wreaking havoc on the bedrock principles that undergird this organization. The rising tide of hegemonic, unilateral, interventionist interference now threatens to inundate entire nations, while responsible states stand askance from their responsibilities to speak and act in defense of central charter tenets. Everywhere, north, south, east, and west, the hegemonic imperial hand is visible, and oft times the metaphoric eagle threatens to unleash war and disorder in unilateralist vainglory. what all the world peoples want is simply peace, dialogue, security, and prosperity. That's all we want. The sustained and coordinated attempts to engage in externally imposed regime change in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is but one egregious example of the current trend. We are witness to an illegal economic blockade, eerily similar to the one against Cuba, that we annually and overwhelmingly decry as immoral and anachronistic. We are in possession of indisputable evidence of extensive foreign interference in the sovereign affairs of the Venezuelan people and the frequent, unambiguous threats of military intervention. We are complicit in an international farce.
That was Mr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. Gonsalves very clearly is carrying the flag of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. He's trumpeting the cause of President Maduro. He is condemning and criticizing the United States of America for its foreign policy positions towards Venezuela, very clearly. But the same Ralph Gonsalves is saying to Guyana that, look, Guyana, you have a duty to ensure that this zone remains a zone of peace. And this same Ralph Gonsalves has been negotiating a meeting between Presidents Ali and Maduro since September. And this meeting is happening 4 days from now. The leader of the opposition was not notified, has no knowledge of these negotiations. Is Mr. Ralph Gonsalves' involvement in this process sufficiently credible to allow President Ali to participate in this proposed meeting?
I have my doubts, but before I try to answer that question, could I back up a bit?
Certainly.
This zone of peace matter that keeps cropping up. As the zone of peace, according to our CARI conference and others, as it exists, what is happening in the zone of peace? Our land is threatened. Our economic development is threatened. We're under pressure from Venezuela, militarily and otherwise. That is the zone of peace they're talking about. And yet they're calling on us to maintain a zone of peace when everything is being done to us, which suggests that there's no zone of peace.
And may I interject just to put this on the record, please, with your permission? President Maduro has said, in offering condolences to the surviving family members of our servicemen who fell and to our country, he went on to say that if you mess with Venezuela, you will be dried up.
Yes, I heard it. I didn't quite understand what
this is a direct military threat.
It's a threat. It is a threat. So that is the zone of peace they're talking about. Now, for Mr. Ralph Gonsalves, he's a prime minister, so I spare him the description of a vessel. I would say that he seems to be anxious to carry water for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Now, President Ali is our president of Guyana. It's our entire country at risk from Venezuelan aggression. And I therefore hope that whatever Mr. Gonsalves has worked out with his friend Nicholas does not have layers that we do not know about. I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
Very clear.
There's no diplomatic meeting or arrangement where you have an agenda and there's not an unstated agenda, which most people will not know about. I'm trying to answer the question about whether Ralph Gonsalves is a credible interlocutor, intermediary in this situation. I don't think he is, and as a Guyanese, I am very worried as to what he's done to bring these two heads of state together. I don't know what agreements were reached with all of those big players in this situation: Brazil, United States, Britain, to get them to come together. I do hope that the president has a clear idea of what the agenda for this meeting is, and he does not go to St. Vincent only to discover that the understanding that he has is not the understanding that President Maduro has, because ever so often in diplomacy, that is what happens.
I have a problem as a citizen. See, I am Essequibo, and Essequibo is me. And I have a problem with the manner in which the negotiations happened. I have a problem with the agreement to meet. In the present environment, and given the nature of the proposed meeting and so on, would it not have been better to assemble a team of technical experts, Foreign Service personnel, military personnel, maybe representatives of the executive below the level of the president on both sides, and allow those two teams to meet to hammer out, first of all, the agenda, and secondly, to address the issues on the agenda and to report to the respective heads of government. The heads of government will then be sort of referees in the case where matters that the two teams are talking about, they cannot arrive at agreements on, then the leaders step in. Rather than putting the two presidents to meet, and if there's a fallout, if Mr. Maduro says, I'm here to talk about land boundaries, and Mr. Ali says, well, I'm very sorry, but I am not going to discuss land boundaries. It is against the wishes of my country and my people. Then there's no meeting. It collapses. What do you do then?
Incidentally, I'll try and answer the question, which is inferred in what you said. I hope my understanding is clear. We're not going to discuss the land boundary. I hope correspondingly, we're not going to discuss the maritime boundary. Increasingly, if you look at the statements coming out of Venezuela, especially after those oil blocks were auctioned off, I think in September.
Yeah.
The statements coming out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the President Maduro's office was very strong on the question of the maritime boundary, where they know ExxonMobil has been finding a lot of oil. I hope that is clear to the people who are going to this meeting. Not discussing the land boundary, and God forbid, we're not also discussing maritime boundary. Nobody said that so far. I'm waiting for a clarifying statement from our friend Ralph, or maybe from
His friend Nicholas.
yeah, his friend. Now, the question you asked, let us assume that this is an ordinary diplomatic situation. What you said is quite right and proper. That this meeting should have been at the end of a building process. That lower levels in the individuals would meet and work out the details, and then the presidents will come along and bless the entire arrangement. Now, I do not get the impression that that was done. And I cannot say that it has not been done. Because if you're having all the contacts over 3 months, it cannot be only at one level of government. I mean, it can't be just the heads doing it. there must have been people at the lower levels who must have been involved in this exercise. And note that sometime in December, the foreign minister of Venezuela spoke to the foreign minister, sorry, our foreign minister, Mr. Todd. There was no public statement as to what the two of them discussed. Those are things I think we should not allow to happen in circumstances where information that is clear and which is truthful is conveyed to the Guyanese people. You have a very good point. There's been a lead up to this event, and we really don't know exactly what is the nature and the structure of those discussions, because it had to be a case where important details were hammered out to make it possible for two heads of state to decide to meet. They're not going to meet if they know they're going to discuss each other's shoelaces, or who drinks, or who makes a better beer, or whether the Demerara rum is better than the rum in Caracas. Something important happened that made it possible for these two very important officials, important men to meet.
Turning your mind back to the days of Forbes Burnham, Mr. Burnham took pride in making it clear that at every step of the way, in the earlier days when this controversy arose, that he kept Dr. Jagan, who was then minority leader, abreast and informed of all developments. So there was no need to jump to the rooftop and crow. By extension, the leader of the minority leader is aware, and therefore the constituency that he represents is aware.
Yes.
The head of government is aware, and by extension, the constituency that he represents is aware. So we're all on the same page. This is a case, I don't want to call it good faith, but what other term is there that we can use that is not considered offensive? As we discuss this issue of non-information from the president of this country to the people of this country, when another CARICOM head of government must make our country aware that there are these negotiations, they've been going on for 3 months, and they will culminate 4 days from now in a meeting which involves our president on a matter that touches and concerns each of us.
The existence of this nation.
The existence of the nation. Thank you.
The existence of this nation. Yeah.
I mean, what do you call that? What is the diplomatic language to describe that without?
Let's go further. You're from the Essequibo.
I am Essequibo.
Right.
Yeah.
You belong to a particular group in this country.
Yeah. We owned this land before others came.
You're on the borders there. And you're sitting there and you hear that the president from across the Cuyuni or the Mazwini there is coming to meet your president on that side. And somebody meets you in the streets of Martik or Region 1. And they say, Comrade Marvin, we are concerned. Decisions might be taken to affect us in these areas. Can you tell us what those two great men are likely to discuss? What can you say?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Sorry to be the interviewer.
No, that's perfectly all right.
I don't know. I think I had the opportunity to discuss in a meeting. I would not say where and when, and I hate to speak about my time in the foreign ministry, but information was more carefully, formally, and better distributed, especially coming out of a diplomatic situation or an impending diplomatic situation than I'm seeing now. When I worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Office of the President, it was with both Mr. Burnham and Mr. Hoyt, especially if they were undertaking visits. you had to do background pieces in the newspaper, and you had to give the public an idea of what is likely to happen when they proceed to these important events. Events, as we said, that will have an important bearing on the existence of this country. I'm not saying that. I don't know what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing. The president is leaving in 2 days' time, and there's been no press release. I don't know when they're going to say exactly what is going to transpire. So far, what we've had is what you've been saying on Facebook, and I think 1 or 2 statements by the president himself. I'm talking about a public form of the distribution of information to the average man in the street.
As it is now, Ambassador Austin, the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is going to attend a meeting that the citizens of this country do not formally know about.
No.
What does that say for governance? What does it say for confidence of the people? What does it say to patriotic Guyanese who are willing to stand up for a country's sovereignty, who are willing to lay down their lives, as 5 have already done in defense of our country?
Well, it is. I mean, I'm not in the government. I do not know who's responsible or how the system of the government works. But the more information you get out there in a timely manner, the better it is both for the government and for the population.
So should we be worried or should we be happy at these developments?
There should be some concern, because I would like to know what would be the likely outcome of this meeting on other politics. I would like to know if there is an agenda. I would like to know, according to either the letter or what has been said on Facebook, this meeting is going to be witnessed by the Brazilian president and an Undersecretary of the United Nations. Now, what else is going to happen there?
Will there, in fact, be a meeting? Will there, in fact, be discussions? If President Maduro says he's there to discuss delimitation, boundaries, land or maritime, and President Ali says, I'm not prepared to discuss those issues.
What happens?
What happens next? Will we remain a zone of peace, or will President Maduro exercise what he's been threatening to exercise all along?
Well, what can happen if a meeting like this goes south and there is the 2 men cannot come to some understanding as to what they should discuss, and there is a feeling of somebody being misled by somebody else, and there is a deterioration in the relationship, personal and otherwise, between the 2 men. And the situation, as complex and as volatile as it is, we could actually face a more aggressive Venezuela as a result of that meeting not going as well as it should, as far as Mr. Maduro is concerned.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is about all we have time for today on Nation Watch. Ambassador Austin, I want to thank you very much for joining Nation Watch again today and for bringing us, the Guyanese people, up to scratch with what's happening.
Glad to have.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining Nation Watch again this Sunday. We're always on watch for the nation, and we are continuing with our series of programs to discuss the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. By God's grace, next Sunday we will do so again. Thank you very much for joining us and staying with us throughout the course of the program. Until we meet again, God bless. Be safe.
Land of Guyana, of rivers skies and plains, made rich by the sunshine and lush by the rains. Say a gem light and fair between mountains and seas, your children's sons